All right. Hello. Thanks for joining the Authors Guild Foundation for our educational series webinar, Audiobooks, Tips and Resources to Access a Fast-Growing Market. The Authors Guild is the oldest and largest professional association of writers in the US, and it exists to support working writers and their ability to earn a living from authorship. The Authors Guild Foundation is our charitable arm that puts on free educational programming such as this. And these days, we're particularly interested in discussing sources of revenue that authors can tap into during and after the pandemic. Audiobook sales have been strong and growing, so we're happy to have with us Randye Kaye. Randye is an actress, radio broadcaster, and the author of Ben Behind His Voices, public speaker, voiceover talent for everything from commercials to audiobooks. Randye's going to walk us through the process of turning your book into an audiobook to reach a wider audience and unlock that stream of income. We'll discuss the value of audiobooks, whether you should narrate the book yourself and the equipment you would need to do so, and the options for finding and working with a professional narrator and everything else related. Randye has a wealth of information to share with you, so we'll let her present and then turn to a Q&A. You can pop questions into the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Apologies if we don't have time to get to every question, but we're going to cover a lot. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Randye.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. And hi, everybody. I have a presentation for you. I will be sharing my screen in a second, but I just want to start by saying hello and thanking you for taking time to join me this evening or watch it recorded later if that's what you're doing. And I'll tell you a little bit more about me later, but I know we have a lot to cover. I want to get you out of here in an hour if we can do that. So let me get started by sharing my screen. And hopefully everybody can see that. Now, Johnny's in charge of the chat room. So Johnny, if there's anything I need to know, just interrupt me at any time. So I want to welcome you. I can see that there was a great deal of interest in this, and this is tips and resources to access a fast-growing market. And boy, is it ever fast moving. So our agenda tonight is to, first of all, just kind of cover in the first half hour, why an audiobook? And then we'll talk about if you want to do it yourself, an author narrated audiobook. What are your options? And let me get rid of this thing on the bottom of the screen. There you go. What are your options? What skills would you need? What equipment would you need? And if you decide that's just all too much for you and you'd rather hire a professional narrator to do it, we'll talk a bit about that process as well. Just a little bit about me. Johnny pretty much told you. This is me. And, obviously with great lighting and a little retouching, I am an actor and a voice talent. And I became a member of the Authors Guild when my book was published by Rowan and Littlefield, Ben Behind His Voices, One Family's Journey from the Chaos of Schizophrenia to Hope. It is still in print, I'm happy to say. And I did voice the audiobook version of it, and it was nominated for a Publisher's Weekly Listen Up Award in the Read by Author category. But I think John Lithgow won instead of me. So if you're going to lose to somebody, that's a good thing. So that's how I became an author and narrated my own book. So let's get right to it. Why should you do an audiobook? I'm assuming you're interested because you're here. So when you go on Amazon and you look at a book, it actually looks more professional to see if you've got a hardcover, an ebook version, whatever that is, and an audio edition as well. More and more people are looking for audio editions, so it does look more professional. Audiobook sales are through the roof and growing all the time. You can see the statistics here. $1.2 billion in 2019, up 16% from the previous year. And this COVID crazy year, more and more people that I know are listening to audiobooks. I expect sales will rise a great deal. And this continues what will be, I'm sure, a 9-year trend of double-digit revenue growth. Another thing is you can reach a wider audience when you have an audiobook. There are some people who just don't have time to read, or they say they don't have time to read. And My daughter is a perfect example. She has three kids now under the age of 5. She had them all in 2.5 years. And reading is just really hard for her. She's exhausted at the end of the day. But for the first time in a long time, she and I can discuss books we've read because she has discovered audiobooks. More and more people are listening, not just in their car, but as they're doing housework, as they're taking a walk, as they're cooking. So if you take a look at this little chart about how audio is replacing ebooks as publishers' digital growth engine, you can see that the pink is downloaded audio, which we'll get to in a second. And the sort of gray area is physical audio, CDs. And you can see back in 2008, there was no downloadable audio. You had to actually go get the CDs, or before that tapes, or, before that records. So we don't need to go back that far. But as more and more books are made available download only, or at least in addition on download, they are more and more of the revenue growth. So yeah, I don't have time to go over the full history, but recorded books has been around a long time, starting with helping the visually impaired, starting with when they were on actual records, and then moving on to CD. And then there were forms like Playaway for a while. And now the most popular form, I believe, is the downloadable version. You just stick the whole thing on your phone. Either you borrow it from a library service or you purchase it, usually from Audible, and then you can listen at your leisure. A few other facts to know. Audiobook consumers really care about the quality of the narration. If you've ever listened to an audiobook and halfway through said, I can't even finish this book because the narrator's so awful, or even 2 pages in, you know that you can lose a reader by way of a listener if the narration isn't good. Most prefer a professional voice actor to the author as a narrator, but not always true. And we'll get into that in a second. But there is a clear market, by the way, which is a new trend for shorter audiobooks. I know one of the questions that Johnny sent to me earlier was, what about an audiobook that's under an hour? A lot of people like those as well. They listen to podcasts, they listen to short audiobooks. One of my best-selling books that I narrated is under an hour, and it's about how to sleep train your child. And I didn't write it, but I wrote it. And that's probably the best-selling one I have on ACX. The car is the number one place, but home is important. So because I'm covering a lot in half an hour, and I should keep my phone here so I know what time it is, some resources for you to get additional information. The most important one I can think of is the Audio Publishers Association. Their website is right there. It's audiopub.org. And they will give you a lot of information about the history of audiobooks. How do you get started as a narrator? There's so many resources there just to access. Most of us narrators are members, but you don't have to be a member to get into the resources. Audible itself, which, as you probably know, is the main distributor of audiobooks, an Amazon company. They have some resources as well. And there's a great magazine called AudioFile, F-I-L-E, not P-H-I-L-E. And they have great resources as well. So I want to give you places to go after this presentation is over. So how do you get an audiobook done? Now, I know some of you have a professional, your book was traditionally published, let's call it that, and others of you self-published. And I'm not going to get into how to publish your own book right now because we're talking about audiobooks, but there are certain publishers that have their own audio departments. Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Hachette Book Group, Scholastic, they all have their own departments. And if you're published through any of these departments, then they probably did your audiobook as well. More and more, they like to have the audiobook come out at the same time as a traditionally published book. But many of you were not traditionally published, or your traditional publisher decided not to go with an audiobook. And so know that there are other major publishers in the audio world who contract out the audiobooks. I have done over 100 titles for this first one, Tantor Media. Then there's Blackstone. There's a bunch of them. And Audiophile magazine on those resources I gave you will tell you more. Audible itself produces and publishes audiobooks, recorded books, books on tape, Brilliance Audio in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So just a note about if you want to have your audiobook done through your traditional publisher. Will you have approval of the narrator voice? If it's not you, maybe. Depends on your contract. You as the narrator, maybe. You may have signed away your rights. The audiobook, when it comes out, some of you are still in the process of being published and you're hoping your audiobook will come out at the same time. Will it come out as a hard copy, like a CD that you can hold in your hands and put on your bookshelf? Maybe. Less and less, frankly. If you have the audiobook rights yourself for a book that's already been published, and let's say you want to approach Tantor Media and say, would you please produce and publish my audiobook? They may not accept your submission. They get lots of submissions and they don't do them all. But if someone else is producing and publishing your audiobook, there's no upfront cost to you, similar to the way your book was done. Will you get royalties? It depends on your agreement. I know there are a lot of contract questions. I'm not a lawyer, but Johnny has some answers for you on those. So let's say you want to do it yourself. A do-it-yourself audiobook production. First, I want to talk about you narrating your own audiobook, which can save you a lot of upfront costs, how you can do it. And then if you decide that's just too much, then we'll talk about hiring a professional narrator. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is a company called ACX, Audiobook Creation Exchange. This is where you can create, narrate your own audiobook, and you can narrate it yourself, or, and I'll get into this later, you can find a narrator to do it for you, but they will produce and distribute your audiobook. This is basically in the US, UK, Ireland, and Canada. If any of you are from other countries, there are other options for you. So ACX is the big daddy around here. And I have 17 titles that I narrated for other authors through ACX. But what you need to know about ACX is that they generally, to my knowledge, will give you, maybe to split with your narrator, 40% of the royalties, but only if you're exclusive to them. And generally, you need to sign a contract with them. I believe you get royalties for 7 years, but things are changing all the time. But it would not be fair if I didn't mention the big, I won't call it a scandal, but the issue that has come up lately with ACX and Audible. Audible works on a business model where if you want to join Audible, you get a certain number of audiobooks per month for your monthly fee, similar to a Netflix kind of situation, except Netflix is more open. But they've recently said to get people to be members, hey, you can have an audiobook from us. You can download it. You can even listen to the whole thing. You can return it anytime, no questions asked. The free return option means they don't have to provide an answer. And so what a lot of listeners are doing is getting a book, listening to the whole thing, and just returning it without explanation, especially if it's a series of books they're listening to. They listen to one, they return it, and they get the second one, they exchange it, and they're treating it like a lending library, which it isn't. Lending libraries, that's a separate contract with separate rights for something like Libby or the like. So a lot of the narrators and a lot of the authors are up in arms about this because when somebody returns your audiobook, then you have to return your royalties. So I just want to make you aware of that. I don't know, Johnny, if you want to speak about this now, but I know that Authors Guild is going to be taking some actions. So do you want to say anything about this?
Yes, I don't have a lot of details myself, but we're aware. It was brought to our attention about a week ago. We are working on it, and we'll announce something in a couple of days. If you're on our email list, you'll definitely get that update. Otherwise, check back or go to authorsguild.org and you can sign up for our newsletter on our homepage. But yes, we're aware of these concerns. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. So just so you know that we know that that is an issue. Now, there are other publishers who will distribute, but eventually most of them have to go through Audible in some way. But your contracts with these people are going to be different. I asked my fellow audiobook narrators which ones they like to work with if they're not working with ACX. And Spoken Realms is one. I actually wrote and produced an audiobook on there. They're very on the up and up. And all of these places, if you go to, they will tell you what their deal is. I just want to make you aware of some of these names. A lot of people love Find Away Voices. I hear a lot of really good things about them. I heard a lot about Pink Flamingo Productions, the Audio Flow, and authorsrepublic.com. There are a ton of these. So you're going to have to do your research. My job now is just to let you know that these are available. The royalty situation might be different, but you might be happier with a smaller company, and they will talk to you about distribution. Eventually, it all shows up on Amazon, trust me. And then there's Northern Lake Audio, people like that. And then there's specialties. Audiobook is exactly what it looks like. It is erotica and maybe further, I don't know. But if you don't write that kind of stuff, we always have Cat's Meow Productions, which is only clean audiobooks. So you can research these things. They are available. They're producers and distributors of your audiobook. So why would you do it yourself? Well, first of all, if you don't want to hire a narrator, you save money up front because you're going to do the work yourself. If you get, let's say you get the 40% royalties from ACX, you don't have to split them with anyone. And you don't always when you hire a narrator. We'll talk about that in a minute. You have full control of your time. You get it done when you get it done. And many people feel that if you wrote the book, they want to hear you read the book, giving you a deeper connection with your audience. If any of you are authors who also speak professionally, your audiences and your listeners may want to hear you reading your own book if it's a nonfiction, but there are some pitfalls in there. So there are good reasons to do it yourself. Why not narrate it yourself? So you might be a better writer than you are a reader. Some of us just shine on the page and don't shine with our voice. Or maybe you prefer writing to reading out loud, in which case, if you wouldn't enjoy narrating your own audiobook, you might want to farm it out to someone else. Another thing, which we'll get to, is that if you don't do a good job, and that's not just your delivery, but it's the sound quality. If there's poor sound quality, people will return it with cause or be turned off to you as an author. The sound quality could turn people off. The process of recording your own audiobook, you should know, and you'll see why in a moment, is very time consuming. Even if you wrote it, you think a piece of cake to read it out loud, but no, it isn't. But to read, record, edit, or even hire an editor, there's a learning curve. And there are courses that will teach you to do that if you want to drive along that learning curve. But it does take time. I would say 4 to 6 hours of work once you know what you're doing to create one finished hour of audiobook listening. So if you have a short book, it might be worth trying. But I would, like anything, if anyone asked you, how do I become an author, you would ask them to learn first. So I just want to make you aware of what you'll have to learn. There is some initial investment of equipment or hiring of a studio if you're going to voice your own book. And sometimes I found this when I narrated my own book. Once it's in print, it's in print. And you can't change anything. The editing is done. So it is very hard when you're narrating your own already published work to take off your author hat and just be a narrator. You have to kind of get to the place where you go, oh, I wish I had written that differently, but I didn't. So I just have to deliver it. So it's just specialization of skills. All right. So where do you narrate audiobooks? Used to be, we always did them in a studio. Even just 10 years ago, we would go to a studio, we'd have a director, we'd have a producer, and we would narrate things there. And even now, that is still an option. Of course, make sure any studio you hire has COVID precautions in place. So, but that's going to cost you money, but you can narrate it yourself. You can even hire a director if you want and hire a studio. It's going to be all those upfront costs, and they'll record it for you. They'll edit it for you. They'll take out all the breaths, all the things you have to do, but there are upfront costs there. So that's kind of a middle ground if you want to narrate your own book, but not go through all the editing and the recording. And then increasingly, people record at home. So that is because there are a lot of cheaper and more available options for us to do that. So let's say you want to record at home. What do you need? Well, the first thing you need is a good space to record in. This is what I currently use. You see it behind me. That's my whisper room, but those are thousands of dollars, and you don't have to have that. You can use a closet. This was my booth for the longest time. The doors are closed, but I would open the doors. It's lined with foam, and I would close those curtains that you see. What you want is a space that is smaller with lots of fabric, not reflective spaces. I know singers love to sing in the shower because your voice reflects off those shiny surfaces, and it's wonderful for singing, not so wonderful for audiobook. You don't want the sound reflecting off of glass or mirrors or tiles. You want as much fabric around you as possible. When I traveled, I actually once had to take the cushions off the couch and put them around the toilet in the bathroom because that was the only place that I could record where I couldn't hear the air conditioning. So we get very creative. You also need a computer to record on. If any of you do podcasts, you're probably very familiar with this, but you may need a different kind of microphone, and you need a digital audio workstation and know how to use it. And it can be taught. And then you need a microphone. So regarding microphones, your best bet is generally not to use a condenser mic, but to use a dynamic mic. There are, let me see if I can find the notes I took about this. Okay, so dynamic mics, they're not as sensitive as condenser mics, so you won't hear as much of the noise of the room. When you're recording, if the room is noisy, and it could be the refrigerator hum downstairs, you're going to have to turn off your air conditioner. It could be noise outside. It could be just the sounds of your house. That's called a noise floor. You don't want a high noise floor. You're going to hear a hum and a buzz throughout your entire thing. And choosing a dynamic microphone can help you. But so that will help you. And they also tend to be a lot cheaper than condenser microphones. So a couple that have been recommended to me, some of you may be using some of the Blue products for your podcasts, like a Blue Yeti, and that's great, but not so great for an audiobook. Some that are recommended are an ATR 2100X. Again, ATR 2100X. Or a Samsung Q2U. Just do some searching on Amazon or on any of the audiobook sites. There are a lot of articles about this. Or an AT2005. Those are just a few. So AT2005, check that out. Samsung Q2U or ATR 2100X. So you will need a good microphone. You'll need headphones. You'll need probably a pop filter so that your peas don't pop. What it does is, break the airflow. So that doesn't happen. You may need a music stand. You're going to need a copy of your book to read off of. I usually take it on iPad. So, and you'll need a mic stand for your microphone. So those are some of the things. The investment of that may be $1,500, but make sure that you're in a room that works for you. And then I want to show you what it looks like. I wish Johnny, is there a way you can see a show of hands to see how many people are interested in just seeing how a digital audio workstation works, or should I just go ahead with it? I don't know if you want to see a little demonstration or.
Sure, we can do a poll.
Yeah, just see how many want to spend 2 minutes demonstrating what it looks like to record and edit your own voice. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Okay, I did it quickly, but should be there.
Would you like to see the demonstration? Yes or no? And I can't vote, so.
Oh, the audience says yes.
Yes. Okay. Let's do it. So I'm going to share a different screen. We'll stop this share. And I'm going to share Adobe Audition. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So this is an example of Adobe Audition. Now, I do want you to know that you can get and play with a digital audio workstation. We call it a DAW. If you have a Mac, you've got GarageBand on there. It's not ideal, but you can play with that. If you have a PC, you can download something called Audacity. And don't just go to audacity.com because I think it's a porn site. I think it's Audacity Team, something like that. But let's just look for Audacity Digital Workstation. And they will send you something very similar to this for free. So that is a great thing. And don't let it scare you. I mean, basically, this is just your voice in sound waves. So, and I think of it as a combination of an old-fashioned tape recorder and Microsoft Word. That's how I think of it. So if you look down here, you can see a record button. You see a play button. There is a stop button, fast forward. There's all just like a tape recorder. And like Microsoft Word, if you want to record something, you take a file and you open it up. And there's a bunch of things where you have to pick your sample rate and everything. You can learn this. It's not that hard. And there's a brand new file, just like Microsoft Word. So then you hit record and you talk. And so I will read some copy like, who, fiction, nonfiction, kids, no cookbook, tech, also good. So you can see how my voice, now let's say I cough or I take a deep breath. So all of those things are going to show up. Oh, that hurt my throat. So I will show you a trick before I show you this. So if I make a mistake, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United Kingdom. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. When I make a mistake, I clap so that I can see where my mistakes are. So there's the stop button. Now, when you play it back, you talk. And so I will read some copy like, who, fiction. Okay, so here's where I coughed. I cough or all you do is select, just like you would on Microsoft Word, and you delete it. You can also use the same controls to cut and paste it over here. Once you play with it, it's not hard. That big breath that I took, then I make a mistake, I clap. Ooh, fix. Then you hit record. So here's a big breath. So that would annoy your listeners. Breath. Okay, so what I would do, you can either make them silent and just get rid of them, or Control Z, undo. You can reduce them. You can make them smaller. See that? Too much still. So that's just an example. Those are some tricks that you can, it's not that hard. It's like anything else. If you get someone to show you how to do it and you practice, you'll be fine. So I'm going to close that up and I'm going to go back to the share. I hope that was helpful. Now I'm going to go back to this. Screen sharing has stopped. All right. Are you seeing this again now?
Yes, we're seeing
Demo
your,
dog. Okay.
your browser.
So this is Adobe Audition. This is the logo for Audacity. That's GarageBand. And there's another one called Twisted Wave, very good for Mac and iPads and iPhones. I have recorded things on my iPhone in a car and sent off, and not for broadcast necessarily, but sent off to my agent. I've also recorded on an iPad with a different kind of microphone, and it's made it to broadcast. So there's a lot of options and not very expensive. Okay, so what I'd like to see I'd like you to think about if you've ever heard a bad audiobook. And if a few of you are brave enough to type into the question and answer pane, what made the audiobook so bad that you had to stop listening? And maybe Johnny can just read back a few. Maybe I can see them. I don't know if I can see the Q&A pane. I may not need you. Let's see. I see the Q's and A's. Okay, monotone. I see that. Anything else? Anybody have things that just irked you about a narration? Oh, hear that coming in.
It's more in the chat.
Yeah, read too fast, annoying voice. It was the reader, not the production. A lot are coming in. Terrible voice, bland, without emotion, boring voice, or a voice you simply didn't like. Person recording while in the car. Oh my God. Wrong inflection, overacting, whiny voice, so slow, overly dramatic. Yeah, subtle is best. The narrator's voice didn't match the story. The rhythm had no variety, bad music selections, read too slow, no passion for the text. These are great. I should just save this chat box. Seem not too familiar with the text. British voices. Okay, that's a personal feeling. Say more about subtle is best. I will in a minute. This isn't a performance workshop, which I would be happy to do at another time, but I will try to answer as many questions. Kindergarten teacher animating story for children when it's for adults. Okay. All right. Mispronunciation of names. Worst audiobooks done by amateurs where the narrator changed with each chapter. Seeming to misunderstand what they're reading, read too slow. Wow. These are great. Thank you so much for sharing them. And yep, these are the pet peeves. Monotone, too sing-song, that's the kindergarten teacher, or too on stage. Those of you who are speakers and are used to speaking in front of 1,000 people, if you're going to narrate your own audiobook, you've got to change. And a little bit about subtle, sorry. A little bit about subtle is that you want to be reading an audiobook like you're talking to one person in their ear. That's what I mean by subtle. If it's too much, it's too loud, it's too on stage, it's going to turn the listener off. So I will highly recommend that if you're going to voice your own audiobook, you get an hour of coaching from an audiobook narrator coach. Make sure that you don't fall into these pitfalls. And I'll touch on them here. Not telling the story. This is exactly what you guys said to me in the Q&A. Too robotic or not. You're not telling a story. You're just reading words. If you've ever had anybody read to you, oh, let me read you this article from the newspaper, and one paragraph, and you're like, honey, just give me the newspaper. I don't even know what you said. You're right. If they don't understand the story that they're telling and the words and how they fit together to form an idea and form a story or form a point to make, if they don't know which words to emphasize, if they emphasize them too much, these are all things that will make a bad audiobook, and you're not going to make any money. And you might turn off someone who might have read your book but just hated it. So I'm not trying to scare you. I want you to know what the pitfalls will be. So if your narrator, whether it's you or someone else, is not engaged with the listener, or bad sound. So those are potential problems, but all potential problems, most of them, can be prevented. So one thing you can do is learn more about the voice. It's 7:34 already. Okay. Wow. All right, I'm going to keep going for another 11 minutes and then open it to Q&A. So our voice has tone, which we think of as emotional tone. I can say it's hot out or it's hot out. So that's a different tone. The pitch is how high or high low you go. So a lot of people think if I just read like this, it's going to be very interesting. And that's a pitfall. You want to keep your pitch at a conversational place, or it's too fast or too slow. The tempo, the rhythm, and how loudly we speak. You don't want a narrator yelling at you. So keeping those voice elements in mind will help you as you're reading or coaching to read. So some tips for you if you're narrating it. Picture one listener. You're talking to one person and they're listening. So that means you don't want to go too slow, but you don't want to go too fast. And don't be afraid to pause, because their brain needs time to absorb what you said. Check the pronunciations. Just because you wrote it doesn't mean you know how to pronounce it. So when I do a nonfiction book, I have to do a great deal of research. So names, places, make sure you know how it's said. Aim for comprehension, for smoothness. You want to tell the story in their ear. And yeah, take off your writer hat. You can't change the words once it's published. Now, if you're still in the process of writing it, reading it out loud can help you actually edit. But most of the time, you are voicing a book that's already been published. So watch for the noises that don't come from your air conditioner. Watch for the noise of gesturing, clothing that is noisy like leather and vinyl and even spandex. Mouth clicks. You want to stay hydrated all day and during the session. If you're editing yourself, you have to take all those mouth clicks out. So try to prevent them. And remember, talk to one person, not a group. It's not a classroom. It's not a stage. So if you want more information, the APA and ACX resources I've already given you have tons of info. This example is a video that you can watch. Another great resource is by a friend of mine who is a great narrator, and she also provides resources. And just go to narratorsroadmap.com. So that's another terrific resource. An example of what you'll find there. I'm not going to read them all in the interest of time, but there's articles by many people. How to become a narrator, a narrator's guide, narration tips that don't suck, and so on. So bottom line, if you're going to do it yourself, listen to audiobooks. Not only what turns you off, but what turns you on. What is it that keeps you sitting in your car after you've pulled into your garage to hear the rest of the chapter? If you're going to narrate it yourself, I highly suggest you get training. Get training on the tech stuff so that you're not frustrated and crying on your front porch, which has happened to a lot of people who learn by trial and error. And get a coach to coach your performance, or at least listen to the first chapter and give you some feedback. You can ask your friends and so on, narrate a couple of pages, ask your friends, pretend it's not me, would this hold your interest? Practice 4 to 6 hours to get 1 hour, and get help if you need it. If the editing scares you, hire an editor, hire a proofer. Other readers help. Okay, so if this is too much and your brain hurts and you don't want to do it yourself, it terrifies you, you can also partner with a pro narrator. Now, if you have a traditional publisher, they may find the narrator for you. Or in the case of Tantor, they may say, hey, we have five narrators we're considering. Which one do you like the best? So you may have a say and you may not. Or if you're going the self-publishing route, you find narrators on your own. And ACX, this is right off their website. You join, you create a profile, you find a producer who's usually the narrator as well. You can go on there and just listen to sample narrations. So major publishers will choose for you or give suggestions. If you just Google or go on Audible and you search for audiobook narrators, or better, award-winning audiobook narrators, listen, or go on Amazon and listen to the best-selling audiobook narrators. They're going to be more expensive, but know what you're looking for, know what you like. APA has a narrator list. We're all there with samples of our work. If you're doing it yourself to ACX, you just submit your project and you say how you want them to audition, and your mailbox is going to be filled with auditions. Now, what will it cost you to get a professional narrator? All right, well, there's two ways you can pay them. One is to hire them for a flat fee, in which case you keep all the royalties. So a narrator like me, I'm going to go probably between $350 and $500 for a finished hour of audiobook. That means I'm going to send you, it's ready to go. Some of them go for as low as $200 a finished hour, or even less. Or you can pay a narrator nothing and just split the royalties with them. I've done a couple of books like that because I thought they would sell very well. So that could be $0 per finished hour. Or you can do a split. I did one book where the author was a friend of mine. I did the book for her almost as a favor, but she paid me $100 a finished hour and split the royalties with me. So it's going to cost you either way, either upfront or in the future. What do you listen for? Many of you said you don't like when the narrator doesn't match the book. So when you're listening for samples, listen to their voice, their gender. If you wrote a book where the protagonist is a young female, you probably want a young female narrator if the whole book is from her point of view. Listen for age. What's their personality like? Now, we all change a little bit with each book that we do. You want to listen for their pace and their emotional tone, and does it match your branding? So again, there's more steps from ACX. What you do, you review the auditions from the interested producers or narrators who also produce, and then you can make an offer. And if you like the narrator and you two decide, yeah, I'll take up 200 an hour plus royalty share, whatever you decide, and there are a lot of options, it's all explained on ACX, you can send the narrator, say, you send them your manuscript, and they will send you the first 15 minutes just to make sure we're on the right page. It could be part of the book for the audition. For the 15 minutes, I would do the actual book. But when you're additionally, I'm sorry, this slide a little bit out of place, but when you're posting a project, make sure you give them an idea of what you're looking for. I'm looking for a middle-aged female English speaking narrator who also speaks French. I mean, the more you put specs on there, the more likely you are to get auditions that will really match what you're looking for. Put a part of your book up there, maybe a minute or two, as an audition for them to read so you can hear them reading your book. We expect that as narrators. You may get interested in us from our demo, but you're entitled to ask us to read part of your book so you can compare. Let us know when you're hoping to get it recorded by. And if you're not sure of the specs, then trust the talent. After you get that 15 minutes, I would not micromanage the talent. If you hire the talent and you trust that talent and they have really good ratings, you have to let go and if they're totally off the mark, you can tell them, no, this is just way too slow. I'd like the book read a little bit faster. So you have a conversation back and forth like you do with any project. What you can expect from us is that we will research the book, we will prepare the book, we will take notes on any of the characters and create different voices for them. We will match the audition that you've approved. We will match the 15-minute sample that you've approved. We'll set up the files, we'll record them, we'll edit them, we'll generally proofread them as well, or hire someone to proof them for us. We'll clean up any unwanted sounds like breaths and clicks, and we'll deliver on time. And then when that happens, you approve the final product, and ACX distributes your audiobook, and then promotion. A lot of you asked about promotion. And again, we could do a whole hour on this, but there's tons of resources. Here are some ideas. And this is just from ACX, the articles they have on promotion ideas. This is social media, podcasting, email marketing, all of these very similar to how you promoted your books, but you have the option of putting audio samples on places like SoundCloud. You can also discuss your audiobook in a blog post or obviously put it in a newsletter to your fans. Look for audiobook bloggers who might be interested. There is a company called audiobookboom.com where for a small fee, you can get some promotional codes and you can offer a free download of your book in exchange for a review, a fair review. So there are a lot of things you can do. If you're on SoundCloud, or you can join SoundCloud, add a sample of the book on there. You can add the track to a playlist. There's an audiobook lovers group on SoundCloud. Get the samples out there if you're happy with them. There's an audiobooks group in Goodreads, Pinterest. You can keep a board of your books now available on audio. Announce it on Twitter. Thank the narrator. Tag people. And if you feel like the book is amazing, you can try for some of the awards, like the Audio Awards, because that will increase. So for more tips, you can Google audiobook marketing. Karen Cummins is the one that does the narrator's roadmap, but she has an entire audiobook marketing cheat sheet. This is all for free. And that brings us to 746. I hope I've covered a lot of your questions. This is me, Randye Kaye. I'm also found at randyekvoiceovers.com. You can email me at randy@randyekaye.com. Just Google Randye Kaye and you'll find me. But now I'd like just to leave it open to questions, and I can stop the share if you like. For now. Woo.
Thank you, Randye.
You're welcome.
You did cover a lot, and we received a lot of questions, so we'll get to as many as we can. So we received
Somebody
questions
wants
about.
me to go back to the last slide. They missed the website, so I'll just keep my screen up. Back to the last slide. I'll keep that up so you can see it. Okay.
Great.
There you go. All
And
right.
if there are any resources that you want to share with people, Randye, you can send them to me and I can email them out. Great. So we got questions about equipment, doing it yourself or hiring a pro, the financial side of things, and more. So let's get to it. First,
okay. I'm just
we had
going
a
to
few-
share this one. This is the slide that they wanted to see.
Okay.
Honestly, you'll find it if you just Google audiobook marketing. You'll find it. Okay, now I'm going to stop the share. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. A few things. I asked our lawyers for some information for a few questions. One of you asked, should you allow your publisher to have rights to the audiobooks? When the Authors Guild reviews contracts, we strongly recommend that the authors reserve audio rights for themselves because those can be exploited separately for an additional lucrative source of income. If you give those rights to your publisher, then you're sharing 15 to 30% typically of the audio licensing with them. But it's possible to avoid that. Otherwise, a lot of things depend on the contract. Whether it's up to the publisher to release an audiobook or not depends on the contract. Do most contracts insist that one publisher has the right for one specific audio version of a book? Typically, the rights are to audio rights to the book. So they have exclusive rights and you cannot make your own version of it. Okay, so a lot of questions had to do with genres of books. So Randye, are there genres where audiobooks are a better or worse idea? Say, for a memoir, is it a good idea to narrate it yourself? Are there types of nonfiction or technical books that shouldn't be made or aren't worth bothering making an audiobook of?
Yeah, I would say that if your book is a lot of pictures, I mean, this seems like a no-brainer. If it's a lot of pictures and just captions, obviously that's not a good audiobook fit. Children's books that are all beautiful pictures and very little text don't generally make a good audiobook. On the other hand, books for slightly older children who don't necessarily need the pictures, those can be fine. I have voiced a lot of those, but like Goodnight Moon wouldn't make an ideal audiobook. It'd be 10 minutes long. Yeah, I mean 10 seconds long. So anything really, really technical with a lot of equations in it. And one thing to be aware of, if you do have a book, I have narrated a few that I know are doctoral theses that they just got published and they wanted an audio version of it. And because I can tell, because they're always, here's my thesis and here's my, this is how I'm backing it up and research by so-and-so. And so there are things you can leave out of the audiobook if you have a very wordy, academically written book, like the footnotes are generally left out, table of contents, index, resources at the end are often left out. Or sometimes you will say, the print version of this book contains graphs and charts, which you will hear referred to in the book. Please go to this website to access the charts. So there are ways to take a genre that generally wouldn't go audiobook and leave some things out, like footnotes and parentheticals about when it was published and who the publisher is. So, but I would say anything incredibly technical, but almost everything has to be read out loud for the visually impaired. Not always as well as an audiobook for sale, but so those are some genres that I think may not lend itself quite so well.
Okay. What about books with lots of different characters, maybe characters who speak in different accents, male and female characters, heavy on dialogue?
You're going to need
Um,
a fantastic narrator for that.
yeah.
If you wrote it, I think that the authors that I know of that narrate their own books that are most successful, and it's not a blanket statement, I'm just talking percentages, are the nonfiction ones. Unless you happen to be an actor who also writes. And even if you are an actor, audiobook narration is a genre unto itself. If you listen to any of the um, the award-winning narrators, you'll see that they draw you in, and they have a way of making their characters believable but subtle. I am not a master of accents. I'm not a Jim Dale. I'm not a Lake Bell. She knows like every accent. She can tell you, well, Texas, where in Texas do you want that accent to be? So, but I can give a flavor. And for a lot of people, that's enough. You don't want the narrator to do all the work for you. A lot of people ask me about females voicing males and males voicing females. And so it's not it's not Disney. You're not trying to be the princess and then be the prince. Like it's that maybe for children's books, you can get away with larger than life. But for your general novels, you want a flavor. Characters can be personality changes. Men talk more matter of fact, and women ask more questions generally. So there's a lightness, but I wouldn't try to I did a series of romance novels where there were some recurring characters, and I had to keep sound files of like it was the Mustang Ranch series, and there was the Granny who ran the kitchen, and the ranch hand who kept recurring. So I had to keep files. So yeah, you want somebody who, when the listener is engaged in your book, they're aware of who's speaking. If a man is talking to a woman, so you want someone who can differentiate, but without making it so big that it distracts the listener. Like, oh, why is he trying to sound like a woman? So yes, if you wrote a lot of characters, it's actually really helpful to the narrator if you give them a list of your characters and what you have in mind. But generally they're going to sound like themselves, different sides of themselves. But yeah, if you have written a Scottish character, you can expect a good narrator to give it a Scottish flavor at least.
Caroline asked, does she need a separate copyright and ISBN for the audiobook? Definitely a different ISBN, right?
That's a question for the lawyers. I believe if you have somebody publishing your book, they take care of all of that. So I honestly don't know the answer to that. That's a legal question that I don't know.
A few people asked about making an audiobook version of a book that maybe came out a few years ago or longer. So if you have tips on if that's a good idea and marketing in that
Sure.
situation, and then maybe just any other tips on promotion and marketing.
Okay. Is it your own book or someone else's book?
Right, their own book.
Their own book.
Maybe
Oh,
it came out
sure.
years ago. They just never had an audiobook.
Oh yeah. If it's still a book, in fact, if you bring an audiobook now, it might boost the ebook sales. There's something called Whisper Sync, by the way, where buyers can purchase your ebook and your audiobook, and they can go back and forth. Like their Kindle will, or whatever their device is, will keep track of where they are listening. And then so they can read at night and then pick it up where they left off in the morning by listening. So that's 2 sales for the price of 1. I have voiced a lot of things that were published 20 years ago because with this booming industry, and especially with COVID and people are home and they're just getting tired of binge watching Mrs. Maisel. Well, they shouldn't because it's great, but other things. More and more people are listening to audiobooks. And so Tantor, in the last year, I've done maybe 30 audiobooks, and at least 10 of them were published in 2003 or 2000. Sometimes they double it with a reissue of the book and they update it a bit. But yeah, if you wrote it 15 years ago and it's still selling, go for it. It could boost sales of your book.
Great. Plenty of people are wondering about the financial side of things. You gave numbers for the finished hours for
Mhm.
narrators. So by finished hour, you meant a fully edited, usable hour.
Right.
Is there a number of words or pages that goes into an hour typically?
It's about 130 words per minute. So there is, I'll give you another resource. Uh, and again, you can find it by Googling word to time calculator. And it will take you to the studio where I used to coach audiobook performance. And it's Edge Studio. And you just click the calculator. And so if you know the number of words in your script, let's say you wrote a book that is 9,000 words. You just enter it and hit, here you go, 9,000. Anybody want to take a guess at how much that is? That is, if you speak about 3 words per second, 50 minutes. So it's going to be under an hour. So there are ways to tell how long your book will be read out loud. Some books are going to be quicker than others. A meditation book is going to be slower and it's going to have some pauses in there. A very fast delivery detective novel might be faster, but that's ballpark.
Sure. Are there ballpark figures you can give if you're also renting a studio and hiring a producer and editor?
Yeah. So a studio near you, I'm thinking it'd be about 100, could be anywhere from 100 to 300 an hour. Depends on what you want from them. Do you just want somebody to man the recorder, or do you want somebody to direct you? Are they going to do the editing? So a friend of mine just hired me to coach her through her audiobook, and I think she paid like 250 an hour for the studio, but all she had to do was perform it. They did all the editing, they did everything, and they delivered the files to her in the specifications that she could upload it to ACX. Be aware, if you're self-publishing, that Audible and ACX and all the others, they have specific ways they want it delivered. A certain number of seconds at the beginning of every chapter, a certain number of seconds at the end of every chapter, what your noise floor is. I think I mentioned noise floor. They want a certain sample rate, and you can learn all this stuff, but if you don't want to learn all this stuff, it might be good to shell out the money for a studio. But it can be done. If you hire someone to help you learn these things or take a little course on recording yourself, you can learn it. But there's always there's a cost and benefit. So there's a big learning curve. I farm out my editing because I'm willing to give $60 a finished hour to someone to do the editing, because I could be making more money narrating my next book than editing the one I just voiced. So like anything else, you're going to delegate the things that you don't love doing or you're just not good enough at, and someone else can do it faster.
What would you say is a good advance from Audible?
You
Someone
don't
else
get
said
it.
they turned down $500 for 7-year rights. Was that a mistake?
I don't know. I have not. I'm other than my own 2 books that I've narrated, I produced them myself, so there was no advance. If Audible accepts your book, I think that's a question more for lawyers. I know advances are shrinking, but if you can get a better deal, somewhere, great. I'm not in a position where I ever got an advance on an audiobook, so that's not a question I can answer yet.
Sure, sure. What kind of microphone are you using right now? And is
So
that
I
what you
have
use?
I have 2, but I make my living as a radio broadcaster and stage actress and all those other things, and a voiceover talent. So this microphone is the $1,000 microphone, and you can get one for $100 or under, but this is a Sennheiser. It's a shotgun mic. It's really good for getting real close for commercials and stuff. And then in here in my booth, I have a Neumann, and that's another $1,000 microphone. And I got that one because it's what I used at the radio station I worked at. But technology has changed so much. I have another microphone in the closet. If I ever do a podcast with 3 people in here, that costs me $100. It's almost as good as this one, as far as I'm concerned. So honestly, you can get a pretty good mic for 100 and under.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're about ready to wrap up. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question, but we received over 200 questions.
Oh my God, I know. And I've tried to answer as many of them as I could in the space of the 1 hour. Do you think I got to most of the important ones?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I guess, it seems like some people are just wondering if the answer is, if ACX is just the answer, why, like, shouldn't you shop around, or should you go with the mainstream options?
ACX is your answer if you want to be roped into a contract where it's exclusively with them. Oh, someone just said do a separate webinar with just the Q&A. Yeah, we could probably, I mean, I'm happy to come back if you want, or, at some point, if you want to bring me back for a performance webinar and I could coach people reading their own audiobooks, I'd be happy to do that. That's more hands-on. Yeah, a lot of people go with ACX, but be aware of the current issue, which is that if somebody returns your audiobook, which they can, no questions asked, you have to return the royalties that you made. So, give you an idea, it's like if your book sells for $20, you can make $4 on that book or something. I don't know how they do it, but and then they used to have a bounty program. It's if it's the first book somebody orders, but the return policy is getting a lot of people angry. I don't want to put them down. I have 17 titles with them, and they've been kind to me, and I've produced some good books through them, but mostly I work for the professional companies. But they are very thorough. They will guide you through the process, and they will help you. And it'll get straight onto Audible and iTunes and so on. So I'm seeing a lot of thank yous come in. Thank you. I hope I answered most of them. If
Yes.
you know how to find me if you need me. I'm not big on I can't answer everybody's emails, but if anybody needs an hour's, if you want to use me as a coach, I charge $150 an hour to coach you through an hour just to get your wheels oiled, so to speak. I'm not here to sell you that at all. I'm just saying but there are other really good coaches as well. There really are. I'm not here to sell me, but I would recommend you get coaching.
That sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
All right. I hope I've answered, at least given you some food for thought.
Absolutely. Thank you, Randye. We'll call it a night there. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Thanks from the Authors Guild. This was so informative and a really important topic right now. So we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care, guys. Good luck.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.